Welcome to Carpool for School.
Welcome to Carpool for School.
Now, this is episode 4 of the Matthew Hood series.
Yes, are you feeling okay, Matt?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Not too car sick.
Not car sick at all.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Very safe driver.
Thank
I'm feeling
you.
very comfortable.
Well, that's no one's ever said that before, so that's good. We're getting better.
All right, so today we're going to be looking at leadership and school leadership, and we all know we've got a little bit of a crisis at the moment in terms of retention within education across the country. So how do we improve leadership, Matt?
That's a really great and big question. So I'm going to be channeling a lot of two of my colleagues here. One is Jen Barker, who looks after all of the design of our school leadership programs, and then the other is Tom Rees, who looks after the execution of those programs on the ground and has written about this. He's basically a slightly shorter, slightly older, less handsome version of me. So just like, keep your eye out. Keep your eye out.
Yeah, I'm sure you won't like that comment.
He's going to be outraged by that.
No.
Just throw that in. So what do we think about school leadership? So it is. I think it was episode 2 where we spoke about expertise more broadly, and I set that out as a kind of broad theoretical framework that we think is really helpful for thinking about developing expertise in just about any domain, and school leadership is no different for us. So and that clangs a little bit, I think, with some of the prevailing orthodoxy about school leadership in our system, which is largely hung on a kind of theoretical framework around, we could broadly call it transformational leadership. It's about having a vision, it's about being inspiring. Sometimes it strays into sort of being the hero in your context, in your school, whatever that might look like. So we're just pausing and having a conversation about why we think school leadership is really important. So we work with about 6,000 educators a year. As I said, everything from brand new teachers right the way through to school trust CEOs. And the reason that it's really important that we work with the leadership part of that development pathway is because those individuals create the conditions for great teaching to happen. And it's a brilliant study by Professor Matthew Kraft, who is one of my edu heroes. He's a professor at Brown University in the States, which looks at the difference in the rate at which teachers improve based on the environment and the conditions that they work in. And even without any formal professional development, teachers that work in contexts that are supportive improve quicker than teachers who work in lesser supportive contexts. It's a brilliant study and just outlines for us how important this group of people are in the system. So if these people are creating the conditions for teachers to improve, and we know that teacher expertise is the biggest thing that drives improvements in pupil outcomes and narrowing of gaps between poor kids and their wealthier peers, like, how do we help these people to get better? How do we help to improve them? Because that's going to come all the way back to our retention challenge, right? People are going to be happier. The reason why most people leave their jobs is because they don't really like their line manager. So how do we fix that problem? And we broadly think it's the same, or we broadly think about this in the same way as we think about developing teaching expertise. The first thing that we need to do is identify the persistent problems that school leaders at different levels face over any given academic year. One of them might be, how do I create the conditions in which my teachers can improve? One of them might be about, how do I understand how pupils in my context learn? One of them might be about, how do I set a vision for the school and get all members of the community to buy into it? And what we then need to spend more time doing is helping build the knowledge and organising that knowledge around those persistent problems. That means more direct instruction for school leaders and more deliberate practice for school leaders. Conversely then, that means less personality quizzes which try to determine which of a variety of things you are. They're broadly discredited. There are a couple of exceptions, but far too much leadership training focuses on basically identifying personality traits and trying to develop them. Tom did a great little exercise where he trawled through job adverts for head teachers, and the list of character traits that are required are incredible. You know, they want dynamic, inspirational, passionate. They want people who are able to work in all these different contexts. It's just unachievable. And the consequences of that are we end up in a system which has values and over-celebrates a small group of hero head teachers over thoughtful experts who know lots about their domain and how to solve the problems of that domain consistently well to really high standard. There's an academic from Cass Business School called Amanda Goodall who's excellent, and she doesn't specifically work in education, but her work, we're doing a little bit of work with her to try and get her to do some more here. So what she's done is she studied basketball teams, universities and hospitals, I think. There might be a fourth one, I can't remember, but certainly those three. And one of the few big quantitative studies about leadership performance. And what Amanda argues, and a sample size is something like 33,000 individuals have contributed to the work, is that if you work in an organisation where your line manager can do your job, your organisation is likely to be higher performing. That's probably screwed that up, Amanda, I'm sorry, but that's broadly the theme, right? So what we want is experts leading organisations who know about the work of the people that they're managing. If you have a hospital that's run by an expert doctor, not just any old doctor, an expert doctor, the hospital is going to be higher performing than if it is run by someone who doesn't have that same level of expertise. And I think it is through consistently demonstrating, and I hope my team would agree with this, right? It is through consistently demonstrating that you can solve the persistent problems that the team around you face, that then gets people to buy in and follow where you say you're going and work hard for you and stick around. It's when you, and loads of teachers will know this, right? It's when somebody who's in a leadership position makes a decision and you're like, what on earth, where did that come from? And I don't say this with a kind of leader bashing, school leader bashing hat on.
No.
I say it because I think we've predominantly positioned development for these individuals in this transformational space for certainly as long as I've been in the profession, and I really do think it's time for us to think about that again and follow the path that the teaching bit of our profession has gone down, which is about taking a step back, looking at the evidence, making some really good, well-informed bets, and developing on that basis. The pushback that we get is, well, these leaders just aren't going to sit in a room and be taught anything. They're not going to be talked at. They're not going to... we're now doing this all the way up to head teachers. We've got one more group, which is our kind of system leaders, so our education directors and multi-academy trust CEOs. But we're now doing this all the way up to head teachers. Our school leaders are being developed through two methods: broadly direct instruction and deliberate practice. And the feedback that we're getting is great. So this
fantastic.
Worry about, this person's got 15 years experience, there's no way that you could use any kind of direct instruction method with them, it's got to all be discovery learning. I just don't buy it. And we were nervous about it when we started doing it, but we've got a few thousand people being taught using these methods now, and they're getting loads out of it and enjoying it. And I would strongly advocate for those who are also running school leadership programs, just take a little step back and have a think about this. Why would it be if episode 2, we think this is our theoretical framework for expertise, I think it was episode 3, biologically primary and biologically secondary knowledge. So why would it be that a different instruction method should be used, right? We want them to be experts, it's biologically secondary, so thinking about their motivation, thinking about direct instruction, thinking about deliberate practice are the most reliable ways to improve their expertise, and for them to feel great, right? Because you feel great when you learn stuff and you're more successful in your job, you better solve the problems of your team. I don't know, maybe my logic's too simple, there'll be people watching this who are saying you've forgotten about this, that and the other, I don't know, but that's my bet.
Speaking about persistent problems leaders are facing, and I know there are different ways, but are there any effective ways that you've particularly found? Is it a case of just speaking to people? Is it a case of questionnaires? Is it a case of observing? Are there any particular ways that you have found particularly effective?
So this is the persistent problems question is the same problem, like what persistent problems is the same problem that teachers face when we're asked the question, what should be in the curriculum, right? Who gets to decide what's in the geography curriculum or the history curriculum, right? And short of having a national curriculum where it's some sort of group, broadly I think it's the middle leader in the school that they're in, or the middle leader who's working across a group of schools if it's a trust. But it's a hard question, right? Because humans have learnt a lot of stuff and we need to narrow that stuff down into the time that we have available. So this is the same problem that we face, right? So we are just a school, right? We have to think about curriculum, instruction, assessment, environment for the people in our school. Just the people in our school just happen to be adults who are teachers, not small humans who are wonderful. They have these persistent problems and we have to try and figure out, first of all, like what those problems are. Second of all, this is what this language Jen uses and is really effective. It's like she says, what's the right grain size, right? So like when we're picking the problem, how big or small, like the problem can't be so big that it's like, how do we, transform literacy across our local authority, like too big. It also can't be, how do I script the morning meeting on a Monday morning, too small, right? So how do we get a group of persistent problems that are of the right grain size? And then how do we prioritize those problems so that we can give each of them sufficient justice in our curriculum and maximize the chances of people learning them? We could pick 100, right, and spend 5 minutes on each of them. And we know that from episode, I've lost track now, 4, from our cognitive science, that you need to revisit this stuff really regularly, right? So if we pick too many problems and the grain size is too small, people aren't going to remember them because humans forget things. That's something that we know. So we do a few things. The first thing that we do is we go to the literature. That gives us a really good starting point sometimes. It's certainly patchier on school leadership than it is on teaching, but that gives us an idea of the sorts of things that are going to be, the sorts of practices in schools that are most likely to lead to better outcomes for pupils. We call that explicit knowledge, right? It's codified, it's usually in some sort of study. We then have to supplement that with what we call tacit knowledge. So that is the kind of collective wisdom of educators in the system. We try to identify experts. We have a number of advisory groups that operate at different levels, and we take our early bets to them and they help us refine them. So that's the second piece of the puzzle. We also, interestingly, do work from a kind of market insights perspective, right? Because motivation is really important. So we've got to convince people to come and spend their time with us learning about something. So we have to understand as well a little bit about what things are going to catch people's attention at the moment, what persistent problems are popular right now, insert curriculum, right? Like everybody's talking about curriculum at the moment. So we do have to be a little mindful of that as well.